Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm Mark Givler. I've got Kevin Noon with me here today. This is a kind of an unusual weekend edition of the Skull Session Podcast. We'll probably be running a few more of these, especially during the off season when things are a little more recruiting focused on the weekends versus, game days and things like that. But there's just so much going on right now that I felt we had to jump on here and talk about some of this stuff. Let's kind of start with the transfer portal. Obviously, Caleb Downs commits to Ohio State on Friday. It's been a long time, I think, since I've seen this much elation over a commitment. I mean, obviously, this is it's not a recruit. It's a transfer portal deal, but it's been a while. I think it's been at least since Justin Fields, probably, that there's been a buzz around a player of this caliber, and Ohio State fans are getting this excited about coming into the program. So, we talked about it Friday before he committed. We kind of said, look, Georgia's confident. There's a lot of stuff out there that would make your brain kind of lead toward Georgia, but this was so close the first time around. They almost got him the first time around. The one thing that kind of kept him from going to Ohio State the first time around was the Buckeyes had a string of really bad defenses leading up to his decision. And there just wasn't enough time for Ohio State to show him that things were turning in the right direction. They've now had that opportunity. So maybe, head versus heart type of thing. And sure enough, boom, on Friday, Kevin, I mean, this just feels like the cherry on top or the icing on the cake to what could be a dominant defense next year.
Absolutely. And UGA fans were so certain that they were going to get him. It was kind of crazy the way that went down privately on the huddle board over at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Depending on which hour you caught me, I'm like, it's between 1 and 3 to 1 and 5. So 33%, 20%. I never truly threw in the towel and said it wasn't going to happen. I never truly got to the 50-50 point. But this is huge because you can recruit a 5-star and you're not sure what he's going to look like at the next level. We know what Caleb Downs looks like at the next level. 70-some solo tackles, 100 and something tackles total, SEC freshman of the year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just so happens that really on the Ohio State defense, there was one noticeable hole. I mean, obviously they're going to make some changes at linebacker, but the departure of Josh Proctor leaves one hole in that secondary. And that is a position that Caleb Downs is able to step right into and should give Ohio State arguably the best secondary in the nation, in my opinion. So this is huge. I kind of expected maybe some of this type of excitement to come in over Quinshon Judkins when they got him based on just the amount that I've watched him. But I don't think people have really been that concerned about running back as much as they really were just kind of caught up on this one spot in the secondary. And I said all along that this was, this is a luxury get, but they certainly made sure to express to Caleb Downs, we don't just want you, we need you. And the ship came home this time and they were able to land him.
I think he's going to be the best safety in the country the next 2 years. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I don't think that's hyperbole. He was probably the best defensive freshman in the country this year. I just don't think it's a leap to think they've got the best safety in the country the next 2 years. And going back to Judkins, everyone that follows me on Twitter, I think, knows I love Quinshon Judkins at Ole Miss. I thought he was the best running back in the country. This was before I had any inkling or notion that he was ever going to end up at Ohio State. So they have added, in my opinion, the two best players, two of the guys in the country who are the best at their position, one on offense and one on defense. I mean, that's just unbelievable when you combine that with who they have coming back. I said yesterday, it's, I've been watching Ohio State for more than 30 years now, and they've had some amazing secondaries over the years, especially like in the mid to late 90s. I am as intrigued by this secondary going into the season as any secondary they've ever had, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at what came back. You could have had Jordan Hancock leave. You could have had Denzel Burke leave. They both come back. Davison Igbinosun, he's still somebody who has a year left beyond. I mean, it's just really crazy. Lathan Ransom had a decision, but all these guys come back. And then when you look at this, the next wave, Jermaine Matthews, Malik Hartford, some of these other guys, we're not even getting into the Calvin Simpson Hunts of the world. There is a lot of depth there, and there's going to be a lot of football to be played. I mean, if Ohio State is nearly as successful as we think that they could be this upcoming season, 12, 13 games is not your cap. I mean, not at all. So you need to be able to have that moving forward. And the good news with Caleb is, you're getting him for 2 years, whereas you're at the end of the line with some of these guys. You know that this is the final hurrah. So you're gonna see some different configurations and some different rotations. And I think one of the big things too is, now how do things roll downhill? Does Sonny Styles move to linebacker? Does CJ Hicks move to end? You have a lot more flexibility, because suddenly Sonny Styles' position is not just sitting right there in the secondary, and the goal is to get your best 11 out there. So do you slide him down? And then obviously you're not probably going to be running ends as much as you did last year with Jack and JT, but you're going to be rotating. Do you start to move CJ Hicks down? What does this mean? Maybe even for Gabe Powers at that point, when it looks like your linebackers could very well be, Cody Simon and guys like that.
I've said this before, and I'm not going to derail too far here on the recruiting podcast, but I would move Sonny all the way down to rush end. He's I can't make this any more clear. He's a 6-pack of Krispy Kremes away from being bigger than Micah Parsons. He's an inch taller than Micah. He's, 10 pounds lighter than Micah right now. Why is that? That should be the blueprint for how to use Sonny Styles is Micah Parsons. And Micah Parsons spends more time at the line of scrimmage than he does even at the second level of the Cowboys defense. So I would go all in on that. But I do think, to kind of summarize, I think as important as getting downs was, I think the thing that in all of this, it is almost just as good news for Ohio State, is that I think this means the Sonny Styles safety experiment is over, thankfully. And so now I think by landing downs, I think you've massively upgraded, obviously, your safety position, and wherever Sonny slots in your front seven, you've upgraded. So you've just upgraded 2 positions here. I just think it's unbelievable how they were able to piece this together.
Absolutely. I mean, and just the way it all kind of came together, and it's crazy, because we've talked about on other shows how far we've come from December 29th here to January 20th when we're recording and when we're going to air this piece, just how much has changed in less than a month, and how this Ohio State team in 24 could be pretty good, should be returning a lot of guys. Well, lo and behold, it's returning just about everybody. And then on top of that, Ohio State goes out and goes full beast mode in the portal and everything else with these additions. I mean, obviously we've gone through Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins and so on and so forth. And now, we're obviously talking about, picking up Caleb Downs, and, other moves are coming in. And I think the funniest thing to me is that Michigan fans are on suicide watch right now. They're just days removed from winning a championship. And the accusations of Ohio State going out and abusing the portal and buying a team, when Michigan took 10 portal players last year. 10. Ohio State has 5 as of the time that we are recording this. But again, it just goes to show what everybody's perspective looks like, and whatever team you root for, your opinion is going to be formed from that.
Yeah, I mean, the rivalry's back though. The banter, the hatred is back. I mean, like real hatred. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I feel like Ohio State fans, like, they like to talk about, we still hate Michigan. We hate Michigan. It's like kind of going through the motions saying, I think they really, really hate Michigan again for the first time in a while. I just don't think it's hard to hate something that you're so dominant over for such a long period of time. It's just hard to kind of instill that hatred. But this has the flames have been stoked. The hatred is back on both sides of this rivalry. I think it's going to make for an amazing college football season, especially when you talk about the expanded playoff. I think we're in for just maybe one of the best college football seasons ever. I really do. I think it's going to be an amazing season. I can't wait. I wish we'd get this rolling like in a week or two. Just give us maybe a week or two break and then let's get going. But unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit longer than that. But spring ball is not too far away. So, so they get downs. And now everything in the portal is immediately, well, first of all, Caden Proctor goes to Iowa. Look, that, I know Ohio State fans, like, you don't one of those like winning streaks. It's the same, like, fans are very emotional. So like when Ohio State gets, 3 or 4 nice wins in a row, they think they'll never lose a battle again. When they lose 3 or 4 in a row, we're never going to recruit well again. It doesn't work that way. Like, Caden Proctor would have been the ultimate like heater. Like, that would have been the ultimate heat check. Like, that's Steph Curry hitting 4 threes in a row and then like pulling up on the other side of half court and saying, let me see if I can hit this one too. Like, that would have been insane. He goes to Iowa as expected. But now Julian Sayin, who I reported about on Friday morning, that I felt that Ohio State was going to pursue and that Ohio State was going to be in a pretty good spot there if they did. As we sit here today on Saturday afternoon, I would up my confidence level that this is going to happen. We talked about it on Friday, kind of the discussions that need to happen internally with Ohio State. Like, okay, does this upgrade our room to the point that it's worth ruffling some feathers in the room? Is it worth, culture issues, if you want to call it that? I think we kind of throw that around a little too loosely these days. But so some things to weigh, you'd be carrying 5, I think, scholarship quarterbacks at that point, right, into spring. So do you want to be doing that? Is that too crowded? Is there enough reps to go around? I mean, that's up. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin? Before we kind of get into the meat of this,
let's not forget that Ohio State did a job leading up to the 23 season where it was running 2 fields at a time. So you were having 2 quarterbacks repping on one field, 2 repping on the other field. There's no guarantee what the quarterback room is going to look like coming out of the spring. It's still, I think it's still premature to sit there and say, well, I think this guy's going to be the odd man out. I mean, we don't really know, because you can make arguments in multiple ways. You can say that Devin Brown and or Lincoln Keenholz are going to sit there and see that they're getting recruited over, so to speak, and that you've got, between Aaron and Julian and Tavian St. Clair down the line, is that going to force somebody there? But then again, you're also talking about Devin and Lincoln that were part of that Cotton Bowl team that saw what happened when you were not properly set up at quarterback. Devin getting hurt and Lincoln really not getting the reps that he needs leading up. Then there are the people who are concerned what this means for Aaron Nolan. But the reality is that elite kids are not afraid of competition. I think that they just want to make sure that everything's on the up and up, that they're not being deceived and things of that nature. But if Ohio State would have immediately come out the second that Julian Sayin entered the portal, I think that probably would have been a worse message, other than, with Ohio State coming out and being a little bit more calculated, probably having the conversations that it needs to, ultimately being Ryan Day's decision. Because let's remember too, Bill O'Brien was part of the recruitment of Julian Sayin at Alabama. I'm not saying that Julian is like, that's the only quarterback on this roster that's his guy, but it's the only one that he landed at that point. Alabama certainly was aware of everything Aaron Nolan was doing and so on and so forth. But I think it's exciting to see Ohio State with this depth at quarterback. And we knew that at some point you're just going to have to go in and try and get as many as you can, because as quickly as you're bringing them in is as quickly as you're going to be losing them at some point, especially for guys that are in the Ohio State program for a year or two and learning under Ryan Day and, moving forward, Ryan Day and Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, I'm going to separate this into kind of 2 baskets. The first basket is like what I'm reporting, which doesn't always line up with what I think Ohio State should or should not be doing. There's the reporting basket and the analysis basket, or commentating, whatever you want to call it. The reporting basket is telling me that Ohio State is going to go through with this, and they're going to bring in Julian Sayin. And that's kind of been the holdup. Will they or won't they kind of green light this because of not because of Julian Sayin? Like Julian, let's be clear. Let's rewind the clock to when Dylan Raiola decommitted, which seems like a decade ago at this point, given all that's happened since. Julian Sayin was their top guy. If they could have handpicked anyone in the country at that point, it would have been Julian Sayin. They couldn't pry him away from Alabama. It had a bit of, they kind of learned it's a new staff, so it's not the same staff that went through this, but they didn't Deshaun Watson themselves and end up with, like Stephen Collins, a low 3-star quarterback that was probably never going to play for Ohio State. Like they didn't do that to themselves. They immediately said, okay, let's not waste time here. Let's go figure this out. And Aaron Nolan's a great player, a great kid, great leader. There's a ton to like about Aaron Nolan. But I think Ohio State's going to go through with this. I think the thought process is, it's insurance. So Nolan and Sayin would theoretically just at some point have a battle, likely next year, 2025. And now you're not worried like, boy, I hope we really nailed that evaluate. Now it's like, okay, cream will rise to the top there. We are locking in the odds of both of them not being what we thought are pretty low. We are locking in a top level quarterback for the future of our room. My commentary on this, and I think they should do it. So full disclosure on that, I think they should do it. Here's why. And I'm usually the culture guy. I'm usually like, you got to be careful. I'm always on the board talking about like NIL. Like, well, you go out and you pay a defensive end $500,000 in the portal. Guess what? All your starting defensive ends are going to be like, well, I've actually done, or in the portal or in the high school ranks. Guess what? Your starting defensive ends are going to want. They're going to want more than that. It's going to be a constant game. So I guess you got to be careful when you do these things. I'm the first one to say this, but here's the thing. Have they not already done this by bringing in Will Howard? Have they not? I mean, Devin Brown is going to be his third year in the program, and they brought in someone else ahead of him because they aren't sure he's the guy. If they were sure that like the winner of the Devin Brown Lincoln Kienholz battle was the guy, they would have never brought in Will Howard. So why are you going to not bring in Julian Sayin, who, no disrespect to Will Howard, Julian Sayin is a much better long-term NFL prospect than Will Howard. Like Julian Sayin is a more talented player. Now we know Will Howard's got the higher floor because we've actually seen him do it in college, and he's played solidly for Kansas State the last couple of years. But Julian Sayin is a much more talented player. So why would you do that for Howard and risk running off Devin Brown, running off Lincoln Kienholz, but you're not going to do it for Sayin, who's a year behind or 2 years in Brown's case behind those guys? To me, they've already made the decision that they're not worried about hurting feelings in that room by bringing in Will Howard. Am I wrong about that? I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me to be for one and against the other.
No, the math, the math is there. The math checks out of what you've said. They've made that decision because if they felt that what they had internally was going to, lead pipe cinch work out and not be, that there not be an issue, you don't go out after a portal quarterback. You don't talk about Cam Ward. You don't land Will Howard, whatever, the situation may be. So they've already kind of set that in motion. And again, we kind of saw what happened where you have to make sure you have multiple guys that can do it. And that's not to say sell all of your stock in Devin Brown, sell all of your stock in Lincoln Kienholz. It was Kyle McCord's team last year. He was getting all of the reps, and he was somebody who Ohio State gets into this position of where it has to completely push all of the chips in on one guy. It has not done a great job of bringing along multiple quarterbacks at the same time. And I think that's something that CEO Ryan Day has to work on a little bit more, or offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien needs to work on a little bit more, because you get to the end of the year and you realize 97% of our meaningful offensive snaps have gone to the starter. And we've heard the things. CJ Stroud hasn't played a lot of football, needs more football. Justin Fields, he's still getting his feet under him. We're trying to win Heisman trophies for both of these guys. They get to New York, but then you're left at the end of the season and you've got one guy that has 8 attempts and another guy that has 1 attempt and more rushes than passing attempts, and you're in this position perpetually. So I think it's going to be important. And as you said, the cream is going to rise to the top. And while I am, you talk about culture, I'm there too. I'm a big culture guy. I'm a big, you need to be completely transparent and honest when you're talking to these kids and their families and everything else. But everybody knows that if you sit there and you just try to pussyfoot around the situation, all of y'all will be out in the next year, including the coach. So you've got to accomplish the goal. And I think Ohio State under Ryan Day this year has pushed its chips all in on 24, just with its aggressiveness and what it was able to do, not only returning its NFL decision guys, but filling at this point almost every need that it has on the roster, minus maybe one offensive lineman. And we have another portal window that'll come out post spring of where maybe they can bring in another body and see what that line looks like, because we don't even necessarily know what the makeup is going to be there, other than you figure Simmons is going to hold down one of the tackles. Donovan Jackson is coming back. You know that McLaughlin is going to be either a guard or a center. What does it look like at that point?
Yeah, I just don't agree with the notion that Keenholz and Brown specifically should care about Julian Sayin. I just like if Devin Brown doesn't, the way Devin Brown and Lincoln Keenholz cannot worry about Julian Sayin is by beating out Will Howard in the spring. Like if Devin Brown beats out Will Howard, nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. If he doesn't, he's probably going to leave anyway, right? At some point. I mean, he's going to now be a third-year player, still not starting. Or vice versa, like if for Lincoln Keenholz, he's going to be a second-year player. He's still going to be third on the depth chart if he doesn't make a move up the depth chart. Like those guys need to be worried about Will Howard, and Keenholz needs to be worried about Brown and Howard. Like looking behind you just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you have to look at what's in front of you. And so like I said, if Devin Brown doesn't beat out Will Howard, and if Lincoln Keenholz goes into fall camp as the third string quarterback still, those guys are going to have some interesting decisions to weigh. Whereas if Brown beats out Howard, why are you worrying about Julian Sayin? And if Keenholz jumps Devin Brown, even as just the backup this year, why are you worried about Julian Sayin? You're a Will Howard, turned ankle away from being Ohio State starting quarterback, and you've got 3 years of eligibility left. Like, so I'm just not buying that this is like a big culture thing for the guys in front of him. I think you made the culture move, or you kind of showed your hand on that by bringing in Howard in the first place. Now, Aaron Nolan, yes, that's another look. Bringing in a second guy in your class, obviously, we've seen this a million times. It rarely works out for both guys. Usually one guy eventually has to move on. But if I know Aaron Nolan the way I think I do, I think he will stay around and compete until at least there's, make Ohio State make the choice first. I think he'll do that. I really do.
Yeah, he's been on board for a while, and I think that I've said it. I mean, elite competitors are not afraid of elite competition. And if you really believe that you're the alpha dog, you're going to go out there and cherish the opportunity to beat Julian Sayin out for the job. And if that's what happens, then it's Julian Sayin that's looking at what his future may be here in a couple of years. And we talk about iron sharpening iron, and it's not a bad thing for Ohio State to have a really legitimate, difficult quarterback battle where everybody is pushing everybody and bringing the best out of everybody. And the nice thing is that all these quarterbacks are going to get better regardless of where their final destination may be, because of A, going against that secondary we talked about earlier in the show, and B, throwing to the weapons that Ohio State already has. I mean, just, with Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham and so on and so Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate, Brandon Rogers, or Bryson Rogers. It's I would rather, as a developmental quarterback at this point, and you're either a starter or you're developmental until you're a starter, I would rather be in this system right now, learning and sharpening my tools there than maybe going somewhere else and getting thrust into a bad situation. And okay, it's all well and good that you're playing, but if you're playing and you're playing poorly, you're really not helping your future in this industry.
Yep, I agree. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I think it's going to happen. I would predict that Julian Sayin is going to end up at Ohio State when the dust settles, and I don't think it's going to be that much longer. I think he's going to have a decision here pretty soon. So let's get this. We got to get this uploaded. The way things are happening right now, it's like we got to get through this and get this uploaded. Just before we got on air to record this, Dom Kirks, Buckeyes added 4-star defensive lineman to the 2024 class. Put a bow on that, minus of course Sayin in the transfer portal, who they're still pursuing. But this is a guy I've liked for a while. I kind of pounded the table on our board for the last 6, 7, 8 months, whatever it's been. Like, hey, you want to sign a bunch of defensive linemen. You got some 50-50 battles you're in right now, maybe even some battles that you think you're leading in, but you have this guy right here in your backyard who can probably play either spot for you really good. Maybe just bring him in for insurance. They decided not to, but hey, they corrected it. At the end of the day, this is a results-oriented business. They signed, or they're going to sign, Dom Kirks. So how we got to here is almost irrelevant at this point, but I think another big pickup for the future of their defensive line, depth-wise. I think he's probably going to be a 3-tech. I think he's probably going to move inside. But Kevin, like we've talked about before, the sentence, we just have too many good defensive linemen is just never something that a coach has ever said in the history of football.
Really, no. And they're going to be the people that don't follow recruiting, don't like Ohio State, whatever, are going to say, warm body. Dom Kirks is not a warm body. I mean, he, 4-star, committed to Washington, decommits from Washington. USC certainly had interest there. I mean, USC is a program that's really looking to find a defense after the Alex Grinch experiment did not work predictably there. So I think this is a huge get, not only because of just how talented Kirks is, but also Ohio State keeps missing its number. It's important to be able to bring these guys in that have 5 to play 4, and everybody talks about, are you going to redshirt them? Don't worry about it. When you're Ohio State, don't worry about redshirting. All you're doing is extending a year for a program that's not Ohio State, because if they're not going to carry kids for 5 years to play 4 all that often. I mean, maybe once in a blue moon. So it's important. I think that his being able to move into the interior line is great, because Ohio State did kind of get a little bit of a break with Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton and guys like that, not taking their NFL decisions and leaving. I mean, you've got young guys in the program. You've got Tywone Malone, the transfer from Ole Miss. I mean, I think that it really bolsters a position, and I think the hope is that once all the dust settles with Ohio State's coaching staff, that they will have a continuity plan in place for whatever may happen with Larry Johnson through the coming years, and that we won't see the Dylan Stewarts and Marquise Lightfoots and Justin Scotts of the world slip through Ohio State's hands.
Yeah, I just think it's a tremendous late addition. It's been rare the last few years to get a guy this late. Usually, the occasional 5-star will hold out, especially if there's like a coaching change or something. But usually, you're doubling back on 3-star guys and guys maybe you didn't like that much. But to get a guy who I think is a really high caliber player, he's my number 8 senior in the state of Ohio this late. I think's a really good way to kind of finish the class off if we don't count the transfer portal. Big visitor weekend. We are going to dive into that all weekend on BuckeyeHuddle.com. So get on the board and find out what's going on there. We'll have updates throughout the next few days on visitors and what we're hearing and everything like that. But, a few things I kind of wanted to gloss over real quick. Jared Curtis, 2026 quarterback, now really the number 1 quarterback in the country in 2026, now that Julian Lewis has reclassified to 2025. not visiting this weekend. There's the weather. Yes. But this is a, oh, wow, what just happened? Corey Dennis isn't the quarterback's coach anymore. New offensive coordinator. Did have a good visit to Georgia last week. I think we saw a little bit of, I don't say cold feet necessarily, but I think we saw a little bit of, oh gosh, I better think about this. I think there was a very strong chance if he showed up this weekend that he was going to end up committing to Ohio State in the near future. He has told me that he is closing in on a decision. That may also be not as early as expected. We will see. I mean, Oregon, Oklahoma, there's other schools that have now maybe smelled some blood in the water a little bit with the Ohio State visit being canceled. Obviously, again, I think Georgia right now is in the driver's seat. But this may be a situation where if everyone just takes a reset for a minute, that things can pick back up. I'm not ready to sit here and say, oh, it's over. It's 2 years before he has to sign. There's just no chance this would ever come together. There may be some long-term benefits to this if either Jared Curtis decides to wait on a commitment, or even more importantly, if Ohio State says, you know what, let's not worry too much about what happens the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. Let's continue to build a relationship. Let's continue to recruit him. Let's continue to tell him he's our guy. And let's see what else happens in the meantime between, Bill O'Brien getting himself established, how the offense looks in the fall, how maybe O'Brien and Jared Curtis connect, how, again, this is coming from a Georgia people. Julian Lewis reclassifies to 2025, the USC commit, but he's from Georgia. Georgia's trying to flip him. There's a lot of people in Athens who think they're going to flip Julian Lewis to Georgia in 2025. If that happens, how does that make Jared Curtis feel now about Georgia's quarterback room versus, what it looked like today or whatever? And so there's a lot of stuff here. So my whole thing right now is let's just not worry about what happens the next couple of weeks and just see what's happening in June, July. If there's continued dialogue, maybe he'll come up for a visit between now and then, or even come up and throw for Bill O'Brien. There's a lot that can happen. It's 2 years off.
It is. It's a long way away. Ohio State can still kick the tires on somebody like Will Griffin. There are a lot of options there. I mean, obviously, if Jared Curtis is the guy that you really kind of want to go after, you continue doing that. And as just to go back earlier, you don't want to get into a point of where you become so pot committed and so blinded to what the real atmosphere is that you kind of have to take an emergency guy. We're 2 years away. There's a long, long ways to go here. There are going to be a lot of quarterbacks that we're not even talking about right now that are going to emerge as their bodies develop and the light bulb goes off. So there's no real panic, in my opinion, of, the visit fell apart or whatever. Let Bill O'Brien get his feet under him. I tend to think that even if Jared Curtis does, let's say, commits to Georgia next week, that's an awful long time to have to play defense. I mean, especially for a kid that is not from Georgia. He's out of Nashville. It's not like Ohio State's going to be like, well, we're done. We're not, have a nice life. Ay con Dios. Maybe we'll see you in the portal. You keep recruiting right there. So you go on and you see what happens. So not really a cause of concern. Yeah, you would love to have had the visit occur, be able to lock that up, and then you're playing defense for a couple of years. But it does not. I'm not any less confident in how this class of 2026 may turn up. Granted, I've not even begun to think about 2026, so I don't know what that class is going to look like.
Those are my problems. Speaking of 2026, Buckeyes' new in-state offer today. One I've been kind of telling people to look out for. My number 6 player in Ohio in the class, Will Conroy, interior offensive lineman, St. Ignatius. I talked to Will before the visit. I'll catch up with him here as soon as we get off the podcast and catch up with him on his offer. But he was very, very much looking forward to this visit. I think he was very much hoping for this. It's early, so you don't sit here and be like, well, he's going to commit tomorrow or anything like that. You never quite know how it's going to hit a kid from Ohio. but I do think Ohio State's going to be tough to beat here moving forward. He's just a pit bull. He is a mean little center guard prospect, 6'3", 275. The third O-line offer in Ohio in 2026. I've said again and again, this could be a 4 or 5 O-lineman from Ohio class. Like there's like 5 Ohio linemen I've seen that could be good enough. These were the top 3 that they've offered already with him, Sam Greer, and Max Riley. But this is a really good Ohio offensive line class. Again, 3 of my top 6 2026 prospects in Ohio are offensive linemen. So I love the offer. We'll see where it goes. He may want to take some time with this. He may not. Who knows? But love the offer. Full stamp of approval on it. Just a really, really good interior lineman. I think LaCharles Bentley, who obviously started at Ohio State, but from St. Ignatius, I believe, said he thinks Conroy could be the best offensive lineman to come out of St. Ignatius.
And Iggy has put out a lot of good hits. So I mean,
that's interesting. That at least kind of makes your ears perk up a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
So we'll see what happens there. Trey McNutt did make it. So Jared Curtis did not. Trey McNutt earlier in the week said he probably wasn't going to make it. Did make it. So he continues to be kind of top of the board defensive back safety target for the Buckeyes right now in 2025 out of Shaker Heights. So he made it in. We'll be catching up with him, of course, to talk about his visit. And the last thing I think we want to get to here, Dorian Brew, formerly one of Ohio's top 2 or 3 prospects, now one of Texas's top prospects, moving to Texas, was supposed to announce on January 24th. All indications were that the choice was going to be Ohio State. He has backed off that, maybe taking a few more visits here throughout the months of February and March. Is it the best thing in the world? No. Am I worried right now for Ohio State? No. I think it would have been worse for him to commit on the 24th to Ohio State and then go visit 3 other schools in March. I think it would have caused an unnecessary circus. Then fans, the 1% of fans that can't help themselves on Twitter kind of get into your DMs or tweet, and that doesn't help anybody. Then the coach has got to be like, well, he's committed, but we got to keep recruiting this guy and these other positions, these other players in his position. No one's really helped if that happens. So it's kind of a mature decision, in my opinion, where if he's like, well, let me take a few more visits, this is probably the best thing for him to do.
Yeah, you want to sit there and make sure that the kid is fully on board and everything else. I mean, obviously, he has his ties to Ohio State. Mom ran track at Ohio State. It would have been too perfect because he wanted to announce on his mom's birthday, and that would have been quite the how do you do. Oh, happy birthday, Mom. I'm going to honor you by not going to your alma mater. But it is what it is. I mean, everybody lost their mind when it came to the Jeremiah Smith recruitment, and there was really no, he wasn't sneaking around and taking these visits. If he could have taken the visits in a vacuum and not have it be out there, that's fine too, but that's what was going to happen. And I would rather, we talk about, does Ohio State apply enough pressure on some of these visits to secure the commitment? We see sometimes Ohio State looks like it's in great shape all the way until it isn't. But the flip side of that is if you apply too much pressure, and sure, maybe you land it, and then buyer's remorse kicks in immediately from the kid, and then it just never happens. And kids rarely circle back. If they decommit from a place, they're generally gone for good. So make sure that you've won the heart and mind before you accept the commitment, so you're not having to play the game 24/7, 365 the rest of the way.
Yeah, I still expect Dorian Brew to end up at Ohio State when it ultimately matters. Doesn't really matter where he's committed to today or if he's uncommitted or whatever. I fully expect Dorian Brew to be in Ohio State's 2025 class at some point. I just think Ohio State's kind of been the team to beat from the early parts. He has established good relationships with the defensive coaches. He's not only visited right before he moved to Texas, he also came back at one point and visited in between. So he's been very, very thorough with the Buckeyes. He's not, put them off to the side as he moved to Texas. They've still been at the forefront. He and Devin Sanchez have struck up quite a friendship so far. They're down there playing a couple, maybe 30 minutes apart from each other down there in the Houston area. So, relax. Not a big thing. And I'll be the first one to say, oh, this is bad. This isn't good. This is important. I don't think it's that important right now. Count them in December. You can't have it both ways. You can't like be like, oh, it doesn't really matter when they commit early. And then when Ohio State lands 90% of its class before December, oh, that wasn't a strong finish. So look, now he's going to give you a little bit of a better finish, right? I mean, if he just waits 3 or 4 months, it becomes even more important, doesn't it? But, we'll see how the next, month or two goes. I think he'll end up back here at some point for spring practice, and I'm sure he'll take an official. You could do that in the spring or the summer. But yeah, no real concerns there with Dorian Brew. Again, we will have weekend recruiting coverage from the big visit weekend. Lots of good players on campus this weekend. Check us out, BuckeyeHuddle.com, for all that information on the Huddle Forum, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. All our intel goes there first. All our best stuff stays there first. And pretty much there's a lot of stuff that just stays there, period. So, but we want to kind of give you guys a recap because there is so much going on right now. I want to give you guys a new podcast to listen to or watch. So we appreciate everyone listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, helps other Ohio State fans find us. If you're listening on podcast, please subscribe to the podcast feed, whether it's, iTunes, Spotify, whatever you listen to. We would appreciate that. But appreciate everyone watching and listening. It's been quite a few weeks. I think it's going to be a few more interesting weeks coming up. So great time to be an Ohio State fan. Apparently, I mean, it's just been one after the other the last week or two. So hope everyone's enjoying our coverage, and we will talk to you soon.